What's up, guys? You're watching Too Big Geek. I'm TJ, your host. As you guys probably know, DC's New 52 debuted last week with Justice League #1, but this week was the first big release date with a lot of new titles, so I've picked out just a few of the comics that I've been looking forward to reading in my continuing coverage of DC's New 52. Of course, the big release today, at least for me, is Detective Comics #1. This is really the first Bat Family title that we've seen. Of course, Batman was in Justice League, but that's a team book. This is really the first actual Batman title that we've seen, so wasn't real sure what to expect from Tony Daniel on this title. He's the artist and the writer for this one. He's always turned out some good art, but I wasn't real sure about the writing part. He's done some okay stuff in the past, but he really impressed me and turned out a great comic with Detective Comics #1. It's a really tight Batman story, goes a couple dark places, and it features the Joker, as you can tell from the cover, which Tony also did. So it's a great start for a Batman title. It kind of explores that early relationship with the Joker. You also kind of get the setup for who's who in Gotham. The only thing that surprised me is they don't really go into Batman's origin. I mean, of course, we all know it, but the big thing DC's been pushing for this relaunch is that you should be able to pick up the book and not know anything about DC Comics and be able to read it. And it does read well as a story, but I kind of expected that obligatory banner, saying Bruce's parents were killed, criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot. They didn't do that. In fact, a lot of these titles are missing something like that. So I'm not sure about it. I'm, of course, fine because I'm a Batman fan, and I'm sure people will be able to understand what's going on, but just took me by surprise. But that aside, this was a really great Batman comic. If you're a fan of the Bat, I definitely recommend that you pick this up. Maybe you're just looking for something in the New 52. I mean, Detective Comics, DC Comics, that's what it stands for. It's where it all starts. Check it out. So keeping things within the Bat family, the next thing I checked out was Batwing #1 by Judd Winnick with art by Ben Oliver. I've been really curious about this title. Not necessarily excited, but curious to see what they do with it. I've never been really sold on the Batman Incorporated idea. It's a little out there for me, for Batman to be a franchise. But what this issue does really have going for it is some great art by Ben Oliver. It reminds me a lot of what Alex Maleev does with Scarlet. Alex Maleev's art has a lot more of a photorealistic, photo-reference look to it. This one just looks kind of realistic, but with airbrushed over, with soft focus on it. It looks really cool. I definitely recommend you check it out. I'm hoping that Batwing will go somewhere great. It's got a great look to it. I've got faith in Judd Winnick. There are obviously a lot of differences between Africa and Gotham, but there's a lot of similarities too. You've got the gangsters instead of warlords, but it all comes down to, corrupt government officials and things like that. The big question is Judd going to be able to take Batwing and make him something more than just a Batman in another place? I think he'll be able to get there. I can't tell you who got there in the first issue. He didn't knock it out of the park, but it definitely hooked me. I'm definitely going to read issue #2, and I think Batwing is something to keep an eye on. Next up, I've got Justice League International, which is one of the titles I've been looking forward to most from the New 52. I'm a Booster Gold fan, and I like a lot of the Bwahaha era. Unfortunately, I have to be honest and say that I felt like this is probably the weakest title of the 5 that I picked. It just felt a little bit too much like the first Justice League International. There isn't a lot of screen time for anybody but Batman and Booster Gold, but they go through the old storyline about Guy Gardner being a jerk, which he is, but it just felt a little forced and too close to the old story. I know they're probably going to telegraph some of the old moments from the old continuity into the new relaunch. There was one particular scene in Detective Comics #1 that reminded me a lot of Batman Year One. Purposefully or not, I'm not sure. I'm thinking probably so, because they're going to want new readers to experience those classic moments, that older readers know about. But JLI #1 just seemed like it didn't have enough going for it. When you've got a team book, you want to see that interplay between the characters. That's the fun part for me. And with Booster and Batman getting all the screen time, you don't get to see the interplay between this really a hugely diverse group of characters. You got Rocket Red from Russia, and I've really been looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with August General in Iron, who's a Chinese superhero that I know very little about. I'm sure most people don't even know who he is, but there wasn't really any of that. I know it's the first issue. Maybe I'm being a little hard on it, but I was a little disappointed, and I'm going to pick up JLI issue #2. I'm not going to lie, but I was hoping for a little more, so hopefully next issue. Now this next issue I picked up kind of on impulse. I hadn't really planned on it. And that's Men of War #1. If you know anything about the original Sergeant Rock, he was this World War II era hero. He had a whole group, Easy Company, and they were, American heroes. I didn't realize at first that this was going to be, not a direct adaptation of that. This is more of a modernization where they kind of give a nod to where this new Rock character is related to the old, but it's set in modern times. And what really got me is that they're going to pit, basically military personnel, no powers or anything like that, against characters with powers. I call it the Han Solo effect because in the Star Wars novels, Han Solo is basically the only guy left who's not a Jedi. His wife, his kids, everybody's a Jedi but him. Yet he remains relevant because he's Han Solo. So the idea hooked me, and I really did enjoy this comic. I felt like this was the only one of the 5 that I picked that got kind of exposition-y on me at the beginning. There's some military people sitting around in a room, and there's a lot of talk about who's a corporal and who's a sergeant and promotions, and it was all kind of a little much for me. But when they finally get into the action, it's really cool. And there's a backup story in here as well to follow up with what might be a character that's going to come into the main story later. But it was a good read if you've never read a military comic, which I haven't before. I've read some criminal stuff and some other non-superhero titles. But this was my first military comic, so it was really cool. I'm going to check out issue number 2. You guys should check it out. So my last comic today is O.M.A.C. number 1, which I think of as kind of a cornball adventure comic. And that's not a put down. I think we all need that from time to time. But O.M.A.C. was created by Jack Kirby originally, and you can tell because there are a lot of nods to Jack Kirby in this issue. You see the Kirby dots in the background. They kind of, pay an homage to his art style. And it just kind of has that out there adventure feel that I think is really fun. One thing I did notice about O.M.A.C. was it's written by Dan DiDio, and he's always talking about how DC's going to hold their writers accountable to their deadlines with this new relaunch in order to keep everything moving along smoothly. So I thought it was kind of neat that he put himself out there on the first major release week, because it's going to be pretty obvious if he misses his. I don't know if he's trying to set an example for his writers, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it. It's entirely possible. But I really did enjoy O.M.A.C. number 1. It's kind of a fun, corny thing, like I said. The only thing I noticed about O.M.A.C. was you don't get to see much of his real personality, a computer programmer or something named Kevin. So hopefully in issue number 2, we'll get to see a little bit of what it's like to be Kevin, and not just a huge hulking blue O.M.A.C., although O.M.A.C.'s pretty cool. But I really liked O.M.A.C. I like kind of those kitschy titles. Next week I'm going to be checking out Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, just because it looks like it's kind of out there, and I think that might be fun. So if you like that kind of thing, O.M.A.C. number 1 might be for you. So that's all I've got for this week. If you do pick up any of these comics, please do leave me a comment below. Or if you picked up a different title and you want to let me know about it, I'd love to hear from you. Also, feel free to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, follow my channel. And as always, I'll see you next time.